It's rare for a dev team to be on such a hot streak, but Tarsier Studios, the ex-Little Nightmares devs, deserve their flowers, man. I finally got around to playing the demo of their upcoming Little Nightmares rival, REANIMAL, and I'm very impressed with what I experienced in such a short amount of time. In case you don't know what REANIMAL is, it's the game Tarsier's developing after leaving Little Nightmares behind. From what we know so far, it's about a brother and sister trying to rescue their friends on this island. A lot of what we've seen about this game revolves around farm animals, and I really like the fan theory that this game will center around both animal and human rights, cruelty, that sort of stuff. I love how Tarsier commentates on real life shit in their games, stuff other devs don't really talk about. That's what makes their games so effective to me, theorizing on what they're about, what Tarsier's thoughts are on certain topics. I played this demo solo, even though it's built for co-op. The reason being, I also played Little Nightmares 3 solo, so I wanted to keep things fair and compare them on equal footing. I've played all Little Nightmares games that way, so just because co-op is available, I'm not switching up how I approach these types of games. I'll definitely consider co-op for future replays when the full game's out, but for now, we're doing it this way. Also, I have no friends. With that out of the way, let's get into my first impressions of REANIMAL. The demo begins very reminiscent of your entrance to the Pale City in LN2. You're on a boat in the middle of this foggy ocean, swerving through these deep canyons. You end up looking up at a looming silhouette of a factory. This is where the majority of the demo takes place. REANIMAL, while preserving some of that Little Nightmares style, is distinct because it approaches its design in a more realistic and darker way. In terms of horror, this is the best that Tarsier has ever been. Replacing that stylized, cartoony look with more realism makes for some truly terrifying and disgusting imagery. There's a part in the demo where the main boss of this section, this tall, lanky flesh man, burrows himself into a body. Kind of freaky. And I don't recall anything like that happening in Little Nightmares. This, of course, isn't a critique of the LN series, but rather an appreciation that REANIMAL isn't afraid to be its own thing. Unlike Little Nightmares 3, Tarsier isn't scared to break out of their comfort zone and make something similar, but also different to their previous projects. Little Nightmares has always had that Tim Burton, Coraline type of style, which made it stand out, but REANIMAL chooses to look gross, to look unnerving in a different sort of way. Even looking at the trailers or the artwork for the game, we can see these disgusting creatures, like this pig which looks like something out of Okja. It's also reminiscent of your mother, but that's a conversation for another time. I also really like the switch to 3D rather than the 2.5D they've done before. Time will tell if that's for the better or worse, but I can't hate on them trying something different. This game does do another thing Little Nightmares never did: voiced characters.
I thought you were dead.
It's a contentious feature, and I can see both sides of the argument, but as easy as it is to compare the two games, we have to accept that Tarsier's moved on. This is its own thing. We can't expect them to keep making the same game forever. That pressure's now on Supermassive. Everything REANIMAL does solidifies it as a new product with a new world, new characters, new enemies. The voiced characters are interesting because they show Tarsier's no longer going for that mysterious, vague approach from LN. It might indicate they're heading for something more story heavy, where you finish the game actually knowing what happened. Whether you like that is up to you. I don't think it's inherently good or bad. We'll have to see what the final product looks like. I know I keep saying that, but I really don't want to comment on anything that I don't know about. The voice acting itself is muted, and the scarce dialogue feels hopeless. Even without knowing any lore, I can immediately tell that these kids are just trying to survive and stick together, but they've got no hope left in this world. And speaking of audio, unlike the infamous Little Nightmares 3, REANIMAL does actually include music. I still can't believe we heard literally nothing throughout LN3. Whether it was an artistic decision or they just forgot, who knows. But the bit of music we do hear in REANIMAL is great and gives me high hopes for the rest of the soundtrack. What makes REANIMAL so scary to me is how it takes its time building up the ambience and atmosphere. It's a short 25-minute demo, but instead of throwing everything at you to show off, Tarsier doesn't compromise their horror philosophy and make sure to build up the tension rather than unleash it. An issue I and others had with Little Nightmares 3 was that it showed its enemies immediately rather than teasing them, which is a mistake REANIMAL doesn't make. You don't see the boss of the area until 16 minutes into this demo, and you don't get into an actual altercation until about 20 minutes in. But that doesn't mean the demo is boring or slow. It does take its time, yes, but it uses that to put you on edge, so the scares and tension is more effective later on. When the first chase sequence goes down, it takes you by surprise. I kid you not, I've never jumped like this at a Little Nightmares game. Throughout the demo, you see these skins of people just flopping all around the place. What they actually mean in the context of this world is a question for another time, but the point is, they're generally used here as props. There's one part though where you enter this tight corridor to grab a wheel that's missing for this trolley you're going to use to escape, and this happens. It won't come across how out of nowhere this is until you actually play the demo yourself, but this happens after 20 whole minutes of pretty much silence and puzzle solving with nothing action based happening. People thought the factory lady in LN3 had wasted potential because she showed off her insect gimmick way too early, but REANIMAL will definitely not do the same judging by this demo. Like I said, this demo is Tarsier at their best horror-wise. One thing I cannot praise REANIMAL enough for is the stealth sections. In general, stealth in gaming has always been hard to get right. How do you make hiding from someone more engaging than an intense chase or a boss fight? But the stealth here is absolutely terrifying, and I'm gonna give you two examples. The demo wraps up with me entering an abandoned train yard and climbing through the roof of a train to progress. I land inside and see more of those flesh boys. At this point, I was completely on edge after being chased by them earlier, but these ones stayed still, deceiving me, confusing me. Then the tall man suddenly clambers inside through a door in front of me and starts searching underneath all the seats, seemingly knowing someone is here. This is a complete shock to me because he never spotted me before this, but for some reason now he's on high alert. As I hide under the seat with my sister, he gets closer and closer, checking underneath each one. He's directly next to me now, leaning down. And in my mind, I accept that I've failed. I must have hidden the wrong place, or missed the chance to escape, as he's literally on the verge of seeing me. Another kid, one I met 10 minutes earlier, bursts out of a suitcase on the seat above me and climbs out of an open window. The man gives chase. So that whole time, he was looking for the escaped child, not me. It's so deceptive, and that's what makes it scary. The game tricked me into worrying. I exit the train, and the man is stood in the open, with train lights casting a silhouette that makes him seem so large and menacing. He's still searching, knocking down these crates scattered around. Then he approaches my cover, looming over me, ready to find me, and decides to walk in the other direction. This is Tarsier at their absolute best, psychologically tormenting you, making you feel like these scripted events are actually unscripted. After experiencing what Tarsier is doing with REANIMAL, it's hard not to think about what went wrong with Little Nightmares 3. The difference is that REANIMAL takes risks, it changes things. LN3 was afraid to step outside its predefined template, and that's what made it soulless. This is a wider problem in entertainment right now. Big studios get comfortable with a successful formula and refuse to step outside of it. They imitate what worked without understanding why it worked in the first place. That Ubisoft formula from years ago, open worlds, towers, liberations, lifeless NPCs, is one of the reasons people are so critical of AAA gaming. I don't think AAA is dead, but I completely understand the frustration. LN3 fell into that same trap. They copied the surface level stuff like the art style, but missed the actually important ingredients, like the puzzles and storytelling. And the things they did change, like that giant baby, I'm convinced that was just so they'd have a mascot to slap onto merchandise. It didn't fit the world that Tarsier originally crafted. It felt more like a cool set piece rather than anything thoughtful.
Hey, editor's note. So that whole tangent wasn't me trying to make it a point of how Little Nightmares should have switched up the formula and done something completely different. I was trying to talk about how big studios will have a successful formula and just stick to that. In the case of Little Nightmares, they'll only copy the surface level stuff, because Little Nightmares 3 wasn't a Little Nightmares game in my opinion. It was just copying the aesthetics. It was an imitation.
REANIMAL is refreshing because it takes that old LN formula and adds their own flavor to it. Voiced characters, more realistic visuals, full 3D instead of 2.5D. Tarsier knows that doing the same thing too much will get repetitive, or it'll start feeling like they're just milking it. So where does this leave us? After playing this demo, I'm pretty much done with Little Nightmares under Supermassive. Why wait for them to maybe figure it out when I can just follow Tarsier and what they're doing? Look, I do feel for Supermassive. They got handed a difficult task. Following in Tarsier's footsteps was always going to be a losing battle, but that doesn't change anything. I don't believe Little Nightmares is a dead franchise. It's reached such a large following that it's too big to die. Maybe as time goes on it'll shrivel up, but if Supermassive keeps putting out entries and improves each time, it could still maintain a good following. But the truth is, I'm done with Little Nightmares. I'll play those games when I have time, but I won't be going out of my way, day one purchasing and getting giddy about it. LN3 left a sour taste in my mouth. Judging by this exceptional demo though, Tarsier is still an incredibly reliable studio and I can place my trust in them to deliver. Obviously this is just 30 minutes, not a full game, but if this is what 30 minutes looks like, I'm not worried about the full release. So check out the REANIMAL demo if you haven't already. I'm not usually one to play demos, I just wait for the full release, but it feels nice to be in on the hype, especially after how disappointed I was with Little Nightmares 3. And on that topic, check out my Little Nightmares review in case you haven't already. It provides a bit more context into this situation. Consider subscribing if you want to hear more of my thoughts on the latest and greatest games. I'm gonna clock out. See ya.